Hello, today I'm going to be teaching you how to put together your very own crochet balaclava with your choice of granny square. So to start off, my choice of granny square is going to be the Crochet 70s Vintage Daisy Flower by Stitchinwithliz. I will link her tutorial down below. I really love this granny square. I've worked a couple of balaclavas with it already. So the most important thing, if you want to create the same one, you don't have to use this same granny square. You can use any granny square you want. I think the most important thing is that you want your granny square to be somewhere around 6 by 6 inches. Just for the fit wise, I feel like thankfully this balaclava didn't turn out like too tight to my head, and it was able to fit perfectly over a snowboarding helmet. But if you did want to create the same granny square that I did, like I said, I'll link her tutorial down below. The most important thing is I used a 4mm hook to create this granny square. I also used 4-ply yarn, and I will link the yarn that I used down below so that if you wanted to have the same colors, you definitely could. Okay, so to start off, you'll want to make 8 crochet granny squares of your choice. And to just get a little reference of what your balaclava will look like when it's finished, this is a side view. I'm going to be showing you how I stitch up all my granny squares and how I stitch around to get a little bit of a cleaner look around your edgings. But yeah, so to start off, we're going to go ahead and start by taking the granny square that would be right here in the front of our mouth, and what we're going to actually do is we're going to add a row of single crochet on each side so that you won't feel so crammed in your balaclava. Okay, I realized in my last clip I said we were going to do single crochets around the granny square that's going to go around your mouth, but I meant we're going to do double crochets, a row of double crochets. And to start off, I'm going to go ahead and take the same yarn that I used for the background of my flower, but you can use whatever yarn works best for your color sequence that you have in mind or whatever. You won't really even notice this double crochet row that's right here. This is it. You'll work it on both sides, like I said. But yeah, I just used the same color for stitching everything up because I felt like it looked cleaner, but you are free to do whatever you prefer. So to start off, we're going to go ahead and put a slip knot on our crochet hook. I am still using the 4mm crochet hook. Okay. Once we have our slip knot on there, I have a chain 2 in my corner. I'm going to work into that second chain. And also, one thing that I forgot to say, I think it's really important before we start working, you will have a good amount of loose ends throughout this. I feel like that's just a part of it, so you'll have quite a few to put away. I would probably make sure to put all your loose ends away before you start stitching everything together, just to make it easier, to make it less work for you later on. But obviously you don't have to, that's just my preference. So yeah, so I went into that second chain in the corner, and I'm going to slip stitch, and I'm going to chain 3, and this is going to count as your first double crochet. Like I said, so that I don't have to put away as many yarn strings in the end, I'm going to work over this yarn string. So I'm going to go ahead, this is where our chain 3 and our slip stitch is at, and I'm going to work in the next stitch doing a double crochet, and in the next stitch the same thing all the way to the end of the row. We will be working double crochets, and so I will come back once I am closer to the end of my row. Okay, so I have worked that last double crochet, but we don't want to forget to make sure and go ahead and put 1 double crochet in this first chain 2 corner. So just right there is where we'll put our last double crochet, and then you can go ahead and cut off this end, and I just like to chain 1 and pull my yarn that way. And we're gonna go ahead and do the same exact thing to the other side. So again, just doing a slip knot, which I know everyone does their slip knots differently. This is just how I do mine. And again, starting in the opposite, on the opposite side, in the opposite corner, and putting it into that second chain of our chain 2 for the corner. Oops. And slip stitching on 1, 2, 3, and then working in that next stitch all the way down, and just don't forget to work in that first chain as well. Okay, so this is our 2 double crochet rows completed. I'm gonna cut off the little aftermath of the yarn that I crocheted over. And I actually don't weave these ends in because you will most likely crochet over them. But if you want to weave them in, go ahead and do it. It's just one less thing, but you'll crochet a row of single crochets at the bottom of your balaclava that can hide this away, and you'll crochet around the face, so that will also end up hiding these ends away. So I would just say, if you want to, do it, but not a big deal. Now we're going to start to slip stitch the rest of our granny squares together. We don't need to do anything special to the rest of them. So to start off, I'm gonna slip stitch 3 together, which we'll just do technically this one at a time and then this one, and those 3 together will make up the back of your balaclava and the top. So that'll be 3 altogether. And what you'll do is you'll put 2 of your back sides of your granny squares together, and I'm gonna go ahead and take the same yarn color that I used previously, and make sure you're leaving a good enough tail to sew everything in. Do a slip knot again on your crochet hook, and we'll start working in the corner. We're gonna want to work in our second chain, or our second chain 2 that we did in the corners, or whatever you prefer your corner to be of your granny square. I know not every granny square is the same. And what we're gonna do is we'll work the back loops of each of the granny squares. So technically just the 2 that are closest together. So we'll do a slip stitch there, and again picking up this back loop along with this back loop, leaving the front loops, sorry, hopefully you can see a little better, leaving this front loop loose and this front loop out as well. And then just again slip stitch. You don't want your slip stitches to be too tight either. I would try and work them loosely, all a little bit, not too tight, and just continue going into those 2 back loops, or yeah, I would say they're 2 back loops, whatever you prefer to call them, and just continue slip stitching all the way down until the end, and I will meet you at the end. Okay, so I reached my end, and I just want to say again, don't forget your first chain 2. Sorry, that is my dishwasher. It is so loud. Hopefully you can hear me. But just don't forget your first chain 2 or your first stitch of your chain 2, again working in those 2 stitches closest and doing our last slip stitch there. And again, I like to end off with chaining 1 and making sure you leave a long enough tail that you can crochet or hide away later. And so this is what your slip stitches will look like. I feel like that's nice and clean. And again, we're just gonna go ahead and do that same thing to add a third one on, and I will meet you back once I've completed that. Actually, before I add on my last oh my gosh, sorry, got my dishwasher. Before I add on my last granny square, usually, you know, most granny squares are just ended somewhere in the middle of, or the side of a square. So I am going to show you guys how I work over like that little left off piece. Pretty much I still make sure to work this stitch and the stitch we slip stitched into, but let me show you once I get there. So here we are at that point, and that is my little chain 1 kind of off. So this is the stitch before that, so we'll go right in. It might be a little bit difficult or frustrating sometimes to get in there, but just do the same thing, finding whatever you'd liked as the back loop. And oh, I got caught. I think I'm caught. Oh, there we go. And just still doing the same thing, slip stitching through. So there is my chain 1 that I chained 1 off of, and that's the initial one I slip stitch into. So just pick up that bottom one, skip over that ending chain, and yeah, so that will even out and make sure you're lining up with the same stitches. So this is what our 3 granny squares will look like once they're all slip stitched together. Again, this will be the back of your balaclava and this is the top of your head. So now with our remaining 4 granny squares, we're going to be working the sides of our balaclava. So we'll put those 3 to the side. You'll just crochet these 2 granny squares together, and then I said crochet, I meant slip stitch. I started already slip stitching these 2 together. So again, keep them separate. Just slip stitch those 2 together and these 2 together, and then we'll meet back so I can show you how to put them all together after that. Excuse the angle. I wanted to make sure I was getting a good view for everyone on how this looks this way, because I feel like I keep doing it horizontally and it's a little hard. So vertically, hopefully it's easier to see. I finished slip stitching my 2 squares together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our 3 slip stitch granny squares in the middle and our 2 on the sides. Technically, we'll only be working on one side, doing the exact same thing, slip stitching up the side and kind of over to start to get that balaclava look. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Starting off down here in the corners, and we'll slip stitch all the way up to the top to these 2 corners meeting, and we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So let me go ahead and show you. Okay, so I just like to face down my 3 granny squares together, and I'll just put my 2 granny squares over the top of that, grabbing our yarn, again leaving a long enough tail, and just slip stitching or slip knotting onto our hook. going into that same chain 2 in our corner, into that back loop, into the back loop of the other, or front loop of the other. It's just turned around, so that's why I keep saying back loop. Yeah, into those two closest loops together, and just working up. And I will meet you back, because we kind of already get the idea of slip stitching, but I will meet you back once I get to right about to this point. I actually lied. I'm going to meet you back a little bit sooner, because I want to show you guys how I work over these pieces. So I like to just tuck these in to the inside, because that's where we're gonna weave those ends in anyways. So sorry, let me get a grip on that. So in these two corner spaces, going to continue to work those similar, you know, that's that last stitch, and there's our chain 2 right there. So I just like to work into, okay, sorry about that. So I just work into that first chain 2, so that first chain, and then we already technically worked in that second chain when we slip stitched the previous, or these 2 granny squares together. So I just go ahead and skip over those, because we already worked in them, and go ahead and go into your second chain on the other granny square and work through that one, finding the other one on the other side, and again doing those 2 back loops. And that one I do like to pull a little tighter, because it's gonna be over that little end piece, and I just don't want to hold there, so I kind of work that one slip stitch tighter than all the other ones. But yeah, so then that's what it looks like, and I feel like it actually comes out pretty clean, and those line up perfectly. Also, one thing that I like to do when I get to this point and my ends are on the inside, I like to tie them together 2 times, and then I will work them in, or weave them in, once I've fully completed the balaclava. But yeah, and then from there, just go ahead and do the same thing until we get to that corner piece. I will show you guys what I do. So we'll do that same thing where we kind of try and tuck in our little tail from before. So we haven't worked in either of these chain 2, so you will actually go ahead and work in both, and just work again in those chain 2, one of the chain 2 from the other on this granny square that wasn't worked. So chain 2, or sorry, in the first chain slip stitch, and we'll slip stitch into this next one here. And yeah, that's how it'll look. That will be more pulled in, but that is the look you'll get, and I feel like it doesn't look too bad. Then we'll go ahead and finish all the way until the end. Again, making sure to only work in that first chain of the chain 2 on each side. Okay, and once you reach the end, chain 1 and cut off your yarn. And then we are very close to getting our balaclava all put together. We'll go ahead and get our other 2 granny squares and do the exact same thing on this side. And I will meet you back once we do that. Okay, once we've completed our other side, we will have an almost complete balaclava. Now all that's left to do is add on our last granny square, which is the front of the mouth. So what we're gonna do there is just do the same thing. Let me go ahead, get a little closer of a view. Go ahead and slip stitch onto your hook. And don't forget to go into this chain 3 right at the top, because that counted as a double crochet and we do not want to skip that. That's important. And go ahead and just slip stitch as normal like we've done with all the other ones. And we'll do that all the way up till we get to this point. Cut off your yarn. Again, start here. We'll start right here because, yeah, this one will start right here and crochet down this way. And don't cut off your yarn at the end. To work less ends in, just wait. Yeah, I'll come back and show you what to do. Don't cut off your yarn at the end of this point, but do cut off your yarn at the top of this point. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I just finished off in that last stitch. This is the bottom of our balaclava, and what we're gonna do is we are going to chain 1, and I like to start by weaving in my ends, or working over my ends, sorry. But we're gonna work a row of single crochet around the bottom of our balaclava to clean it up and just make the bottom look a lot better. And then that way we're not weaving in all these ends. It makes it a little bit easier and cleaner looking. So I chained 1, and now I'm gonna start working in this double crochet right here. We're gonna go ahead and work. I'll work 2 double crochets, and then I'll go over to this chain space and work in the chain space. Work 2 double crochets, and then start in that next stitch. And yeah, making sure to work over my ends so that it's not something that's being done later on. Okay, so this is still like the other side. In that chain space, we'll do 2 double crochets, and in that, or 2 single crochets, sorry. And then in that double crochet space, we'll do 2 double crochets, skipping over. Trying to think, how did I work that? So I ended up just skipping over onto the next space over here. You can choose to do it differently if you want to add a double crochet there, but I just honestly, similar to doing these, we technically worked those, so I just skip on over to the next one. And I will meet you back around to our first single crochet once I've completed doing that. So this is once we've reached our ends, our last space, we'll do 2 single crochets, and then we will just slip stitch into our first single crochet, chain 1, and you will have to leave a tail to weave in later. And then from there I will just go and cut my edges, or ends, sorry. I don't know why I keep saying that. Okay, so now that we completed our single crochet row, now we are going to work around the face of our balaclava to clean it up a little bit. I just like to start working on the side here, right about, I would say, kind of lining up right here with this stitch on this flower. No specific spot necessary, but that's just where I like to start. And I will work a slip stitch onto my hook, but instead of keeping it on my hook, I'm gonna pull it off. I'm gonna insert my hook into the stitch, then add my little slip knot onto my hook. And then I'll just pull that through and we will chain 2. We are going to be working half double crochets around. So working in the next stitch, this chain 2 will count as our first stitch. Do a half double crochet, half double crochet, and again I am working over my tail so that I don't have to weave that in later. I feel like that just helps a lot more because we do have a bunch of tails to weave in, unfortunately, in the end. So just go ahead to crochet down to this corner. And for this corner, instead of working in the hole, I kind of like to make the hole less prominent right here. So I will work into that chain. Now, once we get to this corner, it's really big and open and we kind of want to bring it together a little bit more. And we also have all these ends to weave in. But what I like to do is in that corner there, we technically worked in those 2 chains, but I just like to bring it a little closer together. So I'm going to go into each of these 2 chains and do a decrease. So going into this first chain, pulling up a loop, going into my next chain, pulling up a loop, pulling through all 4 loops to do a decrease. And then from there, I'll go ahead and continue on to our double crochets right there, doing 2 double crochets in there. And just so that there's not a lot of space, I do it somehow into the double crochet. Just stick it in wherever you want to. And then going into, again, this corner chain, half double crochet, the next stitch, half double crochet, and we'll work all the way down until the next end corner, doing that exact same thing in those chains. So again, just to help you get through that corner, get through this other corner, don't forget to go through that chain space, or chain 2 space, that chain 2, and then going just into the double crochet, just poking through wherever, doing a half double crochet, poking through again, doing a half double crochet, and then in this space doing a double crochet, or a decrease, a half crochet decrease. And then, yeah, going into that chain 2 space. Sorry, you couldn't see it for a minute. And then we'll just continue to work up to the next segment that pieces together. Oops, I skipped a stitch. And to just bring these pieces in around the face a little bit better, I am going to go ahead and double crochet, a half double crochet decrease again, just so that those pieces come together a little bit better and brings the face in a little bit more. And then again, just keep working like normal. We will go ahead and do that decrease over here as well. And I will meet you back once we finish this half double crochet round. So once we reach the end of our first half double crochet row, do last half double crochet in the stitch, we will slip stitch into our chain 2, and then we will chain 2 again. And we will go ahead and work a double crochet. Now we're going to do another round of half double crochets mixed with a couple decreases in there, just to help bring in the face a little more so it's not so much out there. So actually in our next stitch, so we chained our 2, we worked our half double crochet, we will do a half double crochet decrease, like so, and then work down into our corner. And so kind of right there where these two, like right where our last decrease was, these 2 stitches we will decrease in as well to bring in that corner a little bit more. And we're going to do the same thing in this corner. Once we reach these 2 stitches, we'll decrease. Going back around up to this side, we will decrease, I would say right about there in the middle of the flower. You'll decrease right there. And then we will decrease right at the top as well, right again in the middle of the flower. Sorry, I don't know why I had it turned that way, but yeah, again right in the middle of the flower, just to bring in the face a little bit. So again, decrease in this corner, decrease in about in the middle of that flower, decrease about in the middle of that flower, and I will meet you at the end of this row. So once we reach the end of our second row, we are going to work one last row. Now I like to do a color change to kind of bring out, I don't know, add to my balaclava a little bit more. So I will pull through my last stitch with the color I'm gonna change it to, or work the last row with. And I'm gonna slip stitch into that chain 2 of our previous row, chain 2, and go ahead and work half double crochets. This is just a row full of half double crochets, no more decreasing or anything. So in every stitch, work a half double crochet, and I will meet you at the end. Okay, so once we've finished our third row, we are not going to, or we're gonna slip stitch into that chain 2, and then we're not gonna chain 1 and pull like I've been doing. We're just gonna cut our yarn and just pull the yarn up immediately, and we're gonna do an invisible finish. So that's the stitch I just slip stitched into, and we're gonna skip this stitch and go into the stitch after it, but we're gonna go from the back. And then we're gonna find our slip stitch, which mine's right here, and we're gonna go in from the top and then kind of do a little X, go into the bottom. That's just like a bottom loop of the stitch we slip stitch into, and then go into the other stitch that we skipped, and you'll just pull that, and it kind of creates like a little fake stitch finish. And then from there you can just weave in your ends, and then once you don't forget to weave in all your ends in here too, and once you've done that, you will have a completed balaclava. So thank you so much for watching this video and staying. This is my first video, so it may have been a little bit of a mess, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you love your balaclava. I would love it if you tagged me in any of your posts. I'll link my Instagram and my Etsy shop. I also sometimes sell these on my Etsy shop if any are in stock. This red one that I've been showing is currently in stock on my Etsy, so I'm debating keeping this one for myself. It's so beautiful, but I may post it on my Etsy, so just look out for that. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.